Hello, and welcome to Keeping Kids Safe in an Online World. I'm Lindsay Oliver. While the internet can be a great place to learn, to explore, to grow, it can also be extremely dangerous. Spectrum News 1 is partnering with the offices of the U.S. Attorney and FBI in Cleveland, the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland, and the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And tonight we are proud to present tonight's panel discussion held at the Lakewood Public Library. Now, before we introduce our panelists, we want to show you a video, and this video is going to show you just how brazen these predators can be and what they are willing to say to kids. And I want to warn you, a lot of it can be extremely appalling. And then after the video, the panelists are going to go over a number of things with us. They're going to talk about how they investigate and prosecute these crimes. They're going to talk about what we as a community and what parents need to do to protect our community's most precious commodities, our kids. And they're going to work with us on what we should do if it happens to our kids. We want to begin tonight with a look into the darkness that can be the online world.
He said, I know you're a bad little girl that wants to show off. It's a warped world when somebody can get on here and talk like that to what they think is a 13-year-old kid.
Canton Police Officer Brian Allen is assigned to the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force for the Canton-Mansfield area.
We've recently begun chatting where we get online and pose as a underage child and speak to these people. The conversation usually leads to them wanting to meet for sex.
Here, Officer Allen says, I'm 13, does it matter?
He's thinking about it.
The chatter then responds by saying, that's hot, and asks if she's a virgin.
Through some of the apps that are online, like Whisper, Meet Me, Meet24, you just post a profile, and it's amazing. We were doing an operation the other night. I posted a profile, and within 5 minutes, I had 35 responses from people. Yeah, this guy's username is Cute and Fluffy. He's asking me for pictures.
He says he's 43 years old.
Are kids doing that? Are kids sending those photos?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
To strangers that they've never met?
Yep. Kids of families of all walks of life. You know, it's not a poor problem. It's not a rich problem. I mean, these kids are from all walks of life, as are the perpetrators. A lot of times they've already had interactions with children before. A lot of them that we interview say that they've looked at adult pornography for so long that it just doesn't do it for them anymore. So they've moved on to children to excite themselves.
Lisa Hack is a special agent with the FBI assigned to crimes against children.
Statistically speaking, when they've done polygraph studies, the people who are hands-on offenders are then the ones going on to collect child pornography. All too often we see children being raped or hurt in order to produce this material. A lot of times with hands-on offenders, the victim is somebody that they knew.
When it comes to getting kids to send pictures of themselves, she and Allen say oftentimes the offenders are pretending to be a young child of a similar age and using pictures of a child for their profiles.
Sometimes if they prey on kids that are in a bad situation or have low self-esteem, they may also know it's an adult and just know that, or just think that that person wants to help them and take care of them. It's a grooming process.
We're seeing that here in Officer Allen's chat with someone who claims to be a 17-year-old boy. He's asking our pretend 13-year-old girl to do things with her brother.
Let's see where this goes.
The officer writes things like, ew, he's only 10. He will freak out. The predator writes back, teach him it's okay.
That makes me think that he's somebody older.
One of the biggest fears is not only that these guys want to meet, but then kidnap.
We've had a case here in Cleveland in which there were attempted abductions that may have started, over apps such as Kik.
So parents need to know this is happening and it can happen to your kid.
Yeah.
And they could be taken.
Right.
Now I hope that video was as eye-opening to all of you as it was to me as I was learning about it and watching it unfold before me. And especially in today's day and age where kids are glued to their phones, they're glued to social media, and the endless different ways that keep popping up for us to be able to communicate and meet with people and build a relationship with them virtually. Now, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us tonight. We have 4 great panelists who are going to bring us some insight into this problem. They're going to help us get a better understanding of these issues. They're going to help us look for warning signs, and they're going to help us learn how to just talk to our kids about it all. So we'll start to my immediate left. We have Justin Herdman, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio. He was sworn in August of 2017, and Justin was previously an Assistant U.S. Attorney from 2006 to 2013 and an Assistant District Attorney in New York City. Now to his left we have Eric Smith. He's the FBI Special Agent in charge of the Cleveland office, and he joined the FBI back in 1999. He has been assigned to Kansas City, Fort Bragg, and Cleveland, as well as working as a special assistant to FBI Director Christopher Wray. Now also from the FBI, to my far right, we have Special Agent Alex Hunt. He is the coordinator of the FBI's Northwest Ohio Violent Crimes Against Children Task Force, and he is actively working to get these predators off our streets. And we have Bill Stencil, my immediate right. He is from the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and is the executive director of the Humanware Social Emotional Learning Department. He has over 44 years of educational experience from being a teacher, a coach, a psychologist, and a crisis coordinator. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we want to begin with our questions now, and I want to begin with Justin. I want you to talk about some of the different cases that come before you. Are we looking at, is it typically one guy targeting kids? Is he hiding behind a profile? Or is it even a more organized crime that we're seeing?
Right. Well, I wish there were one way to describe the threat that we see. Unfortunately, there's not, because just as many predators as we see online, they have all different approaches and strategies that they use to try to exploit our kids. So it could take the form of grooming that takes place over an online app, where a predator, an online predator, takes the disguise, if you will, of a younger person, expresses some curiosity about their body or the other person's body, your own child's body, and there are conversations that take place online that are essentially where the predator is mimicking a younger kid,
right.
And exploring, and again, like I said, trying to mimic curiosity.
Right.
That's one format. There are other more complicated and complex schemes that involve multiple offenders and predators, where maybe one predator will target a kid, another predator will assume the younger person disguise, and then there'll be even other people involved in the network that would be in a position to try to exploit the kid and try to get images from that child.
So this is a team.
There are teams that are open and operating. Sometimes it's just one individual person who can play a variety of different roles, but there are definitely coordinated teams that are online.
Right. Now, Eric, do you think people are aware of just how common these cases are and how often it's happening? Or do you think really we're only kind of getting media attention for cases that are bigger, for instance, a guy who drives a girl across country?
That's a great question. I think people are becoming more sophisticated to the threat. I think, unfortunately, as technology becomes more ubiquitous, and we're getting technology in the hands of younger and younger children, that parents and guardians are becoming more aware of what's out there, and I think forums like this are a great opportunity for us to kind of talk about it and protect what is our most natural or precious resource, and that's our children. So.
Absolutely. Now, Alex, you work out of the Toledo office, and what shocks me the most is not only that there are predators out there trying to engage with these kids and get pictures or meet them, but you also see people who want to recruit them for human trafficking.
Yes, we do. Again, there are bad people with bad intentions, and they're able to reach out to our children via the internet and cell phone devices for those purposes as well.
How are kids even taking the bait? What's being offered to them?
Sure, a lot of these kids are being promised something completely different than what's being, the reality of what's actually happening to them, whether that's travel, money, a better life than what they're experiencing at home. To answer your first question, they are certainly being taken to other cities, other states, places where the trafficker might feel that it might be more profitable for them to take that victim.
Does it make it harder to then try to track them down if they've already been taken somewhere else?
It certainly can, yes.
Wow. Now, Bill, I want to ask you, what are that was a big question as I'm watching these chats unfold, and thank goodness this was a fake 13-year-old girl, but what if it was a real 13-year-old girl? What are the psychological consequences of a child being spoken to like that?
Well, I think that it really sets a tone for curiosity, for how can I put myself out there and other people can see me. It is very difficult because many of the things that are being discussed with the younger children, they're not used to. And it's that shock effect that kind of hooks them to the behavior and to the predator.
If it's coming from someone older, like what was happening in the video we watched, is this child then going to think this is normal, this is okay, this is...
Often with repeated behavior like that, it becomes the norm, and they don't know anything different. So that becomes what they see and what they hear, and as a result, their actions follow those online predators and those kind of behaviors that they're asking for.
Now, Eric, when you all interrogate these kind of people, when you hear from them, these predators, do you think they have any sort of conscience? Do you think that they understand what they're doing to children? Do you think they care?
I think it sort of covers the spectrum. I think there are some that show remorse, but many believe that it's natural, and it's sort of a devolving scale in terms of what they have participated in throughout the course of their lives. And unfortunately, many will try to rationalize their actions throughout the course of the interview. And the interviewing process is not much different than, I should say, with many of the other ways we interview subjects, which is to establish needs and interests and build rapport. And through that dialogue, you can get to the heart of what the subject is all about. And so it's to the credit of the great skill and the investigators out there who have seen horrific things over the course of their careers that can deal with this on a day in and day out basis, and things that while they didn't participate in the act itself, viewing it over and over and over again is tough on our investigators.
What should parents be looking out for? Any kind of warning signs that something might be going on, and how can they break down those barriers to get their kids to talk to them?
Well, some of the things that you look for are changes in behavior. We often see eating habits changing, sleep habits changing,
Wow.
Friendships changing. Maybe someone that was outgoing is now no longer outgoing and spending a lot of time alone. Often I hear from our young people, no one listens to me, no one cares, no one understands.
Sure, no parent here has ever heard any of that,
standard.
right?
And I think that the family's responsibility there is to be the person listening, to be the person caring, and the person that's at least attempting to understand. We often want to say things, but sometimes just listening, just being a listening ear and being there. The earlier you build those relationships, the better off you're going to be. To start it later is more difficult. To start it early in life, so that becomes habit. As you mentioned earlier, the inappropriate behavior becomes part of their repertoire and part of their life. Well, the relationship, if it's started early enough and strong enough, becomes a major part of their life, so that the parent and the family is reducing the toxic stress and things that are going on in the child's life.
Because it's tough being a kid nowadays. It's
It
constantly
is
tough.
very tough. I know many of our young people, their comment is, I trust no one and I'm afraid of everything.
Why?
There are so many things that seem to be bombarding them and scaring them. And the best method to counter toxic stress is to be the barrier for that child.
Wow.
And if we're not, as parents, that barrier, one of those predators might become that barrier as they groom them
Exactly.
for other things.
And Alex, I want you to jump in on this. What do you see is the way these guys try to groom them? What do you see them either promising them, or what's that process look like?
Sure, a lot of times, our bad guys are filling a void that they find that kid is, or that child or victim is lacking, whether that's self-esteem, loneliness, sense of family, friendship, and then they find that, and then they fill that void. And that's kind of a way in for them to build a relationship. And once they have that relationship, they're able to then start going more towards the victimization, and it makes it a little bit easier for them to do that.
One of the things we look at, a predator was often a person that was abused in some way on their own, so they know what it's all about. They know the feelings, and they know what the young person on the other end may be or probably is feeling.
And so they use that to then prey on them.
Use that against them.
Now, Eric, the investigators, they have to view every bit of text that happened, every picture, every video. Does your office have to do that as well? You all have to look at every
Yes.
little bit?
Yeah, we have to. We have a select group of prosecutors who handle these cases, and they have to be in a position to safely view the images to do a legal analysis on whether they meet the elements of the offenses, to talk to the investigators about what the image may or may not mean in terms of a federal prosecution, and also really the most important part I think of this is to be able to forcefully advocate for either guilt or innocence in the trial stage, but also at sentencing. It's very critical that our prosecutors be armed with the information about these images in order to convey that to the judge and try to drive for an appropriate sentence, which in most of these cases is going to be on the very high end in terms of years of imprisonment.
Right. And we're already seeing a collaboration of agencies here today working hard to combat this problem. Talk a little bit, Eric, about the different kind of agencies that really are working to help protect kids.
I think that's the great strength. It takes a network to defeat a network. The U.S. Attorney just talked about the different online networks that are out there peddling, distributing these kinds of things, or promoting potential production and acts. We have a network as well, and that network is based in strength due to large part by our state and local partners, our U.S. Attorney's Office, our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which has been incredibly prolific in fighting against these crimes all over the state. And without partners like that, without dedicated investigators and victim witness folks, we would not be as effective as we are today. And I think predators should be aware that the person they think they're chatting with may not be who they think they are as well.
So this is happening. That's what parents need to know. This is happening, and it can happen to your kid. So now my question for all my panelists are, what do parents do? What do we need to do differently?
I would say, based on what the attorney said earlier, and he mentioned communication is the key to this whole issue. And as both a father and a special agent in the FBI, I think a lot of what we see can, be sort of mitigated if you pare it down to three key items. One, engagement by the parent or the guardian to make sure that they understand and they take an interest in what their child is doing in the online space. The second would be access. If a parent or guardian is providing that device to a child, then they should have the right to gain access, as we talked about earlier. And then with that access comes some additional responsibilities on behalf of the parent or the guardian, which is to understand how the device works. To make sure that they recognize that how an application basically functions, how the device functions, how the computer functions, how the gaming system provides for in-game chats.
So parents need to learn Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook.
Not all the ones and zeros per se, but they need to have a functional dialogue. At least it had to be conversational in the issue, and I think that would lend itself to a little bit better online hygiene by the child. And then finally, outlets, providing children other outlets than living in the online world.
I'm also a parent, and I think that there's an appropriate level of intrusion that parents should expect to have into their kids'
What is the balance with
life.
that?
Right. Well, so here's what I did. I'm not saying that this is the way to go, but I did think it was important to have a conversation with the kids before. There are apps. There's a suite of apps that are available you can get that provide you some insight into what your child's doing online. I think it's really important to have a conversation with the child ahead of time. Don't spy on them necessarily, just to say, hey, here's what we're going to be doing. This is why. It's to keep you safe. That's the end game here. It's not to really, I don't really care what you're specifically messaging your friends about. I just want to make sure that if there's anything that's inappropriate, it'll get filtered out by this system. We'll know about it, and we want to keep you safe. We want to make sure that you don't have to worry about anything online. But also, with that, that's a good opportunity to have a conversation, a really tough conversation with kids, even young kids, about the nature of the threat out there and what people appear to be online, you should always assume that that's not the case.
Right.
And it's a really instructive conversation for children and for parents to have around just that simple idea of, hey, look, we're going to be paying attention to what you're doing online. Here's how we're going to be doing it. We're not telling you this so you can find an end around it, but we want you to be aware of why we're doing it.
Right. Now, Alex, can I ask you real quick, are there any apps that you find that these predators are typically using that maybe parents not necessarily should ban, or maybe they should, or at least be wary of?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there isn't one or two particular apps that these people are going to. What they're going to is where kids frequent. They're going to, which is several apps. And I think that's why the communication is key. Because wherever there's children and there's people with bad intentions to victimize children, they're going to go to those places.
So what are kids using nowadays? Is it Snapchat? And with Snapchat too, that's a big one where it can go away, right? The pictures, the texts can all go away.
That's the whole idea with Snapchat, is that those things go away. However, offenders are able to capture those images maybe with another device or screenshot. So just because they're sending that video or that picture doesn't mean that it's going to go away in the 5-second timer or 6-second timer you put it on. That's something that might be able to be used against them later when an offender's trying to blackmail them with a photo or try to eventually get to the point where they're meeting with that victim.
So your point is, any app your kid is frequently using, monitor it.
I believe so. I think, of course, having that communication with your children about the dangers, using any of those apps, because those are communication tools. And another thing to know also, I think parents need to be aware of apps that exist that mask activity. There's certain apps that exist that might be a calculator or a calendar that inside that calculator or calendar is actually a messaging forum.
Wow. Parents are probably going to be away at work and kids might be left home alone during the summertime. So they have access to these devices. They have access to a computer typically at the home. So this is going to happen. They're going to be able to communicate when parents aren't around. So we've got to have a trust factor, right?
Absolutely, and I think that from the family's perspective, as what was mentioned already, there has to be an awareness that there can be some bad things happening. And then I think that's followed with education. And educate yourself and your child. Do it together. Get a good education on what's going on. And something we didn't mention, but good, responsible modeling of online behavior by the adult. Our young people are watching everything we do. And that modeling is extremely important. Now building the relationship, when we talk about being intrusive, you're not quite as intrusive if you have a strong relationship with your child. And they're used to you sharing, talking, and working through some of these issues with them. And trust is extremely important. All people want to be trusted. And our young people are trying to build that trust with those around them. So you have to give them some leadway, but you have to guide that leadway because you can't be there all the time.
But should you have access to all their passwords? What would you say to that?
I would say, as an overbearing parent, if I'm paying for the device, then yes.
I agree, but there is also a spectrum here. I mean, it's not one size fits all, and some of the commercially available apps that parents can have access to monitor their child's activity don't require that same level of intrusion. It's really up to the parent and the child in that particular relationship to determine what the best fit is. But I would say, start as intrusive as everyone's comfortable, and then if you need to modify that going forward, feel free to do so.
All right, we're going to start with our audience questions now, and I want anyone on our panelists to feel free to jump in and answer. This one is there any way to block the camera on your phone or any other technical equipment being used?
Electrical tape?
That was my go-to.
It really, that works.
On the phone too, you think?
Sure, yeah, you can do it, yes.
So tell us how we can make the internet safer. I have tried a number of different kind of parental controls to no avail, and she mentioned specifically YouTube. What do we think? How can the internet be safer? What can we do?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that you can do. One of the things I do on my son's Xbox is limit screen time. So making sure that I put limits on there, particularly during the school year, where they're only allowed on a certain amount of time, and so they know that time is limited, time is fleeting. I also go down during gaming time to say, who are you talking to, who's that online? I make a very active effort to go down and look and see what that conversation's all about. Who is that? Who's that? So constantly asking questions and just being inquisitive, and I think that helps drive some of that conversation.
Okay. Bill, I think this question might be for you. I'm worried my son is being bullied online by classmates. Are there specific signs I should be looking for, and how can I handle it?
The school would be looking to law enforcement for that, because generally...
For being bullied?
Yeah, the online bullying.
Okay.
Because generally the online bullying has happened often outside of the school setting. Mm-hmm. But of course, we would be willing to help them gather that information. The things that you're looking for, once again, are those changes in behavior where you can't really explain why the child is uncomfortable, sad, changing friends, staying in instead of going out with friends, not interested in activities that they were once interested in, sports, extracurricular, music, whatever it may be, a loss in interest of that, and those habits that change. Can't sleep, not eating well, maybe not taking care of themselves. And one of the other things that you look for too is they begin to talk poorly about themselves.
Oh.
Because they're hearing that from others, and they may talk about that, the way they look, the way they act, the way they talk. They'll share that in very subtle ways, though. So again, being there for them is helpful, and building that relationship that if it is happening, there's a comfort level to come in and share that. Because we know when it's the online bullying, different than most of us grew up with, it doesn't go away. You can't go home and it stops. It is with you 24/7. So,
what is the best app for parents to use to protect their kids' phone usage?
I don't want to be in a position to endorse any particular app. I would say that there are a lot of great resources, though, to identify what might be the best app for any particular parent to use. So whether you start with a school safety website, which is usually probably the best place to go to get just an idea of what's out there, because there are a number of different ones, and they all have different features, and it really depends on a case-by-case basis what the best fit is. Right. But the information is definitely out there, and it's absolutely worth doing a comparison between the apps and to determine what's there's often a cost associated too, so that's a consideration. And it is often tied to the number of devices that you'd like to monitor,
of course.
And what other features are available. So really is hard to answer that in any kind of global universal sense, but I just think it's important for parents to actively educate themselves on what's available and then go out and determine what the best fit is.
You all have brought just a wealth of knowledge to our audience here tonight, our viewers at home, and hopefully parents feel a little bit more equipped to deal with these tough conversations and to help better protect our kids, because that's the goal at the end of this. We want to thank all of our partners for helping make this panel discussion happen tonight, from the library to our panelists for joining us. We really want to thank you. And we do have more resources available on SpectrumNews1.com as well, a list of resources to better educate parents, to help them talk with their kids about different things, and to learn how about some of those apps and how to better protect them. For Spectrum News 1, I'm Lindsay Oliver. Thank you for joining us.